Okay, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Good afternoon and welcome to this WIOA Summit 2021.
Loud, I'll turn it down if you want.
My name is Molly Cook with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University, and I will be on to help with technology today. Today's session topic is workers' rights in the age of COVID-19. As a reminder, we ask that all participants on this session have their audio on mute, and we ask that you do not unmute yourselves unless prompted to participate in a potential engagement activity by our presenters. If you have questions as this session proceeds, please post your questions in the Q&A or chat box, and we will address them during our live Q&A portion of this session. If you feel comfortable, we encourage all participants to participate and engage with our presenters by having your video turned on. Please note that this session is being recorded and your video will potentially be on the recorded session. The presentation and corresponding materials are located on the Illinois Workforce Academy website under the 2021 WIOA Summit for your convenience. This session recording will also be located on the same webpage within 2 weeks, and I'll post that link in just a moment. In an effort to be as accessible as possible, this webinar will be offering closed captioning. We will be joined by a sign language interpreter today. If you are an attendee that requires the use of sign language interpretation, please find the interpreter. You'll see they have ASL interpreter next to their name on this session and pin them on your Zoom platform by going to the 3 dots located on your Zoom window image and selecting pin. Please make sure you are in side-by-side full screen gallery view to fully access this interpreter's video. A reminder that if you have a faulty internet connection or would prefer to call in, you can do so by calling into this webinar by using the phone number that I'll post in the chat in just a minute. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our presenters to get us started.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Alison Dixon, and I will do a more formal introduction of myself in just a minute, but I also wanted to recognize my colleague, Ashley, if you want to say hi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Hamilton. I'm the Frontline Focus Program Manager at the Chicago Jobs Council.
Thank you. So just quickly, a little bit about me. I'm a senior instructor with the Labor Education Program at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, the School of Labor and Employment Relations. And I put a bio up here just real quick so you get a little bit of sense of where I'm coming from. I'm an economic researcher. I'm focused on issues affecting US workers, especially low-wage workers, families, and communities. I'm particularly interested in policy issues pertaining to low-wage labor markets, including minimum wages, paid sick leave, fair scheduling legislation, and efforts to combat wage theft. And some of these terms, they might be new to you, or you've heard them but not, had a good sense of what exactly they entailed, such as fair scheduling legislation and wage theft. And those are all things we're going to be talking about today. So in addition to my research, I direct and teach in the Worker Rights Project, a U of I initiative that provides bilingual Spanish-English worker rights training for low-wage workers. In collaboration with the Chicago Jobs Council, I also conduct train the trainer courses for frontline providers of workforce development programs in the Chicagoland area. Let me just, apologies. That picture of me was pre-pandemic, and I still got good sleep and looked a little bit more polished. So today, for the next 3 hours, we're going to be discussing worker rights kind of broadly, but I think especially focusing on some of the issues that are affecting the job seekers that you work with, and discussing some of the ways that have worked that we've seen work very well for connecting worker rights to job training programs. And so I will be doing some lecture. There will be also breakout groups, and we'll be covering a couple of key issues that affect workers, low wage workers, middle wage workers in Illinois, including wage theft, looking at the different minimum wage levels, misclassification of workers. So that's when somebody should be called or should be classified as an employee legally, but they're being called perhaps an independent contractor. We're going to look at workers' compensation and then also different types of illegal discrimination. And with each of those, we're going to really talk about what are best practices for your job seekers for documenting these issues and enforcing their rights. I just want to do a little housekeeping. And also I want to make sure, is my everything, now I'm looking at the interpreter, and just I want to make sure that my timing is good and that I'm not going too fast. Yes. Okay, so housekeeping. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to put them in the chat box. I'm also going to make sure that folks have my email, so you can always feel free to email me. We will have 2 5-minute breaks during the session. As was said before by Molly, please turn on your camera if you'd like to. It's certainly helpful for instructors doing 3-hour classes to have people's cameras on to be able to gauge audience participation and understanding of the issues we're talking about. You'll also be receiving a link to a Google Drive folder that's going to have many additional resources along with this PowerPoint. And just a quick note, I just want to make sure, and this is hopefully self-evident, but just to keep in mind, we are all navigating very challenging and varying working situations with children, other dependents, animals interrupting our work, despite our best intentions. I have a son doing his schooling in the next room over right now, and even though I have talked to him and he knows I'm teaching for the next 3 hours, inevitably he will bother me at some point, and so I apologize in advance. It is just the world we're living in. And so on that note, please give extra love to all the mothers in your lives this upcoming Mother's Day, which is this. As you're listening to the lecture today, I think it would be good to, if there are any quotations I say or just words you see on the slides that really stand out, make sure that you write them down or just take note of them. Any questions, certainly. And then also talking points. I think that this is a really exciting opportunity that I'm able to present at this WIOA Summit, because this is the first time that this information has been brought to the summit and on this largest scale. And so I think it's up to all of us to figure out good ways we can connect this information with the work that we're doing and to make sure that our colleagues and other people in our lives know about it. So all these 3 things I think would be helpful. And like I said, you're going to be getting a resource folder. So the other thing I want to, just before I move on, just mention real quick. Today, April 28th, is also the 50th anniversary of the creation of Osha, Occupational Safety and Health Act. And to commemorate that anniversary, it is also the annual Workers' Memorial Day. And what that day signifies is that each year, on this day, on April 28th, labor groups across the US organize events to lift up the memories of those who were injured, made ill, or killed on the job during the past year. This day is also a time to really renew our commitments to the fight for safer workplaces for all. I think that this is especially relevant this year as we remember and mourn all the essential workers and frontline workers that have died during the pandemic. We mourn the lack of protections and care and disproportionate impact of workplace accidents and COVID-19 amongst people of color and immigrants. And I'd just like to ask that all of us remember and honor all those we have lost in the past year and recommit ourselves to the struggle for safe, healthy, and just workplaces. And in addition to Workers' Memorial Day, we have May Day this Saturday, May 1st, which is the annual commemoration of the struggle for worker rights that is celebrated across the world. It is the anniversary of events that happened in Chicago in 1888, when workers were massacred by police, and there were, I mean, it's a very, very interesting history for anybody who isn't aware of the Haymarket affair. I'm not gonna take time to go into labor history today, but this is an important week, and so it's also very exciting that we're able to present this information at this time of year. So why teach worker rights? I think primarily because the issues that we see facing workers across the economic spectrum have really reached epidemic proportions in terms of the amount of violations that we're seeing. So we use this term called wage theft, and that's all the different ways that workers have their pay stolen from by their employers. So there's lots of different ways that happens. We're going to go into a little bit more detail in just a few minutes about that. But I was able to work on a study in 2009, so 12 years ago already, where we surveyed thousands and thousands of workers in the Chicagoland area, and we were able to measure that at that point in 2009, 2008, that $7.3 million was being stolen from low-wage workers just in Cook County every single week. And so with inflation, that number is higher, obviously, but that's an incredible sum of money that is being taken out of low-wage communities. And so we use words like epidemic not to be dramatic, but because when we think about this and the very serious consequences it has for families and for neighborhoods, there are, many different serious implications, public health implications, and using words like epidemic, I think, is useful. We also have this lack of education about basic rights, right? This is not stuff that, for the most part, folks learn in high school, not really on the job. Legally, workplaces are required to have posters posted in a break room or some other common space, but oftentimes those posters are out of date and are only provided in English and perhaps Spanish. And so this is not, and I think that most people don't take the time to actually read them. And so this is really not information that people are learning anywhere, despite the fact that we all work. We also have a very confusing patchwork of laws. And so in Illinois, because we're a home rule state, different municipalities and counties can set stronger laws than the floor, which is what the state sets. And so we have different minimum wages in Chicago, different municipalities of Cook County, state of Illinois. And then when you look at all the communities that we work in that are along the border, it gets even more confusing. So Indiana, Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin all have different minimum wages from Illinois as well. The same goes for paid leave, paid sick leave, paid family leave, anti-discrimination laws, all that can vary significantly depending on where you work. Why connect with workforce development? Well, we really believe that they're part of being job ready is knowing your rights as a worker. And so I think many of us are involved in financial literacy activities. And I think when we think broadly about what financial literacy means, part of that should include protecting oneself against wage theft and other workplace violations in order to help workers earn more money and better support their families. And so we connect this type of education in a very tangible way to the work that you're already doing. And we also just think that, I mean, after having done this work in the workforce development arena for the last 10 years, that it's a very, it's an excellent partnership, right? We've got between the populations that you serve and the missions of your organizations and the career focused educations, that this is just a very smart strategic connection. With that said, I want to make sure that folks know that we have developed a curriculum that is open source and free for download. The 3rd edition is available, and we can, Ashley, perhaps can you post this link in the chat box, please? The curriculum is housed on the Chicago Job Council's website. This is something that was done in partnership with the Chicago Jobs Council and with the UIC School of Public Health. And it's the first of its kind in the country. Nobody else has created a curriculum like this that helps frontline job trainers figure out exactly how to do this. Just to give you a sense real quick of what the curriculum looks like, there are 8 different units that span the gambit of different worker rights and different employment and labor laws. And they are all, I mean, while federal laws are included, certainly, for the most part, the curriculum is very Illinois specific and has to do with Illinois stories and Illinois laws, and then also victories that have happened for workers here in Illinois. And so I think the folks that you serve probably could benefit and will get a lot out of some of the activities that are included in here. And all the units have pick and choose modules, kind of recognizing that most folks don't have, time to add on another 2-week lesson plan on worker rights. The idea is that we've organized all the exercises so that they have, range anywhere from 5 minutes to 20 minutes, and they connect to a lesson that you likely are already doing in your job training program in some capacity. So for instance, if you are doing a module with job seekers on interviewing skills, there are activities in the curriculum on recognizing illegal discrimination in hiring. And likewise, as we said before, the financial literacy that has to do with protecting yourself against wage theft. So reading your paycheck, making sure that the overtime and the shift differentials were calculated correctly, identifying illegal deductions. So reading a paycheck, I know this is something that's already a part of a lot of folks' programs, but there are examples of bad paychecks in the curriculum where you can see that, just very sneakily how money is being taken from workers. And when I say that, I know that's a loaded word, saying sneakily. More than anything, I think what I mean is that there are issues that happen like this and violations of the law, and they're not always because we have unscrupulous employers who are just looking to steal and rip off from their workers. I think that oftentimes, you do just have accidents and administrative errors, but regardless, like, folks need to know how to identify these things. And so when you see something like a charge for new safety goggles or something like that on a paycheck, it's really important that that worker knows whether or not that charge is actually legit. And so just to conclude with that example, like if the worker had, let's say they had their safety goggles that they needed, which is PPE, personal protective equipment, something that under Osha regulations has to be provided for workers if they need those goggles to conduct their jobs safely. Those have to be provided by the employers free of charge. But if the worker loses their goggles, then the employer could charge them for a new pair. If the goggles break during, or get scratched during the course of that worker performing their job, then the employer needs to replace them. Details like that mean a big difference, right? And so maybe it's only $12, $15, but for a low wage worker, those kind of deductions every single paycheck add up very quickly, right? So this is why we believe it's incredibly important to be teaching these things. And so here you can see, this is what I was talking about, kind of an example of how you could practice math skills, practice financial literacy, and read paycheck stubs. And so what's wrong here? I believe that their overtime, they were just paid overtime at the regular rate instead of time and a half. So what we're going to do for the way we're going to organize the next couple of hours is going through some of these issues, but what I want to do is get folks into breakout rooms, and we're going to have a bunch of case studies. And in your breakout room, which will have about 5 people, I would encourage you, turn your camera on if you feel comfortable. But as a group, we're going to take about 20 minutes to quickly introduce yourselves, and then maybe say where you're from, and discuss what you think the answers are to each of these questions. And so these questions purposely have lots of details and are a little bit tricky and aren't just, it's not very evident on face value what the answer is, but they are all scenarios that have been told to me over the years from workers who've been sitting in my class. I've changed the names and changed the employers' names, but these are ripped from the headlines, things that happen every single day. And so I think that using case studies, and I'm sure you all have lots of horror stories of things you've heard from folks or experienced yourselves or heard from friends and family over the years. I think using case studies like this is a very, very, very good way to get folks involved in discussions right off the bat. In my experience teaching thousands and thousands of workers the last 10 years that I've been in this position, that everybody has a story to tell, and nobody has ever asked these workers to tell these stories before. And there is a lot of value for many different reasons in having folks share their stories and learn from each other. And I oftentimes, a student in my class will share some issue that they experienced once, and likely it's long past the statute of limitations for them to try to file any complaint with whoever the regulatory agency is. But we can use those same stories that are being told by the folks sitting in your classroom. We can use them as a group to basically problem solve and figure out, okay, well, if this were to happen again, what could you do? What could you be doing to document and, to collect information that you would need in order to pursue a claim or to get any sort of justice. And so I just think that this is a pretty empowering way to approach this topic. And in the curriculum, you'll see there's a whole bunch of different case studies and ways you can do that. And if you really take this on and make it your own, I would suggest you start keeping track of your own case studies that you can use that make a lot of sense and that will speak to the folks in the communities and in the towns that you're working. So with that, I am going to post the questions, right, Ashley, into the chat box, and we're going to break out into breakout rooms. But,
Yep.
no,
Perfect.
we went
Thanks,
over
Allison.
everything. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. Thanks, Allison. So everyone, inside the chat box, there is a Word document that has been posted. It says Breakout Room 1. We're gonna ask that you please download that. If for some reason you're having any issues downloading it, please let Molly Cook or myself, Ashley Hamilton, know, and we're happy to help you out. You can also access the questions via the link that Molly just put up. So you can happily use one or the other. But in just a moment, Molly's going to open up the breakout rooms. And when you go to your breakout rooms, just that quick reminder, what you're going to be doing is first off, introducing yourself, get to know who's in your room, and then slowly work your way through the 5 questions that are in there, discussing, do you agree, do you disagree, and kind of looking at the answer choices that are available. When we come back, we're going to be going over each of these, like Allison mentioned, diving more deeply into these case studies.
Great, I will open the breakout rooms right now.
Perfect. Thanks, Molly. And if you have any questions, please feel free to hit the help button and one of us can happily come over to your room.
Okay, here we go.
I mentioned that we have 20 minutes, right? I said that. Ashley? You hear me? How do we go to the different breakout rooms? To see what, is that a good idea, or is that would that intimidate people?
Yeah, you can definitely go. For just a heads up for everyone who is still in this room itself, this is actually its own breakout room. So you can feel free to go ahead and start having the conversation. So like we mentioned, just introducing yourself, as well as then starting to go over the questions that were inside the chat box.
Oh, okay.
And then Allison, I'll have Molly move you over into a breakout room.
Yep, I'll move you into one right now.
Molly, Ashley, I was trying to just click on the Word doc that you put in the chat, and it's saying it's unreadable. Why? I'm the one who made it, right?
Mhm.
I wonder if is anybody else having issues opening it?
Yes, I did as well. But let me go to that folder. Let's see. I can broadcast an updated version of that with a link to everyone. So I'll do that right now.
Okay. So I think for the folks who are still in this room, it would be good if one of you or a couple of you volunteer to be facilitators of this discussion for the next 20 minutes or so. And if we get, oh, the questions open up that time with the new link you sent. That's it. Okay.
Hello, I'm guessing you're having problems accessing the questions. And I can get those to you right now. Is that why you called me? Okay, awesome. Let me drop the file in here for you. Let's see here. I just noticed that as well, that they were hard to access. Okay, so I just dropped it in there. Can you access the file I just put in the chat and open it? Were you able to open that file? Megan, you got the file? Then it looks like Megan may have got the file. Megan, can you confirm if you can open that file and be able to share the questions with your group?
I've got it. I don't know how to share it. I guess I could share my screen.
Or you could just read, could you just read them? You could also read them. If you want. Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go jump into a few other breakout rooms and share those questions. So sorry about that.
That's okay. Thanks for your help.
Thank you.
Oh.
Hello, I'm guessing that you need the questions. We had some issues with the question sheet. Is that what you're looking for?
That is it, yes.
Perfect. I can put this right now in the chat for you. Let's see here. Okay. So is someone able to check and see if you can open that?
Let's see. Not seeing anything in the chat yet.
Not yet? Okay. Sometimes it takes a second. Still not seeing it?
Not yet, no.
Okay, let me try sending it
When
direct.
when I hit download, it takes me to save as on my desktop.
I think that is normal because it's a Word doc, but I can try to just send you the link. Hold on one sec. Let's see. Mhm. I'm uploading it to Google Docs real quick to try and just do it that way. Sorry about this.
No, it's all good.
Okay, so I have a link now. So I just put the link in the chat. Will someone see if they can access that?
I see that now.
Okay.
There we go. I got him now.
Okay, thanks guys.
No
Thank you.
problem.
Facilitator?
I think
Good.
Stacy already asked for help.
Oh, okay.
I'm guessing you need the questions.
Yes.
I'm going to put a link in the chat right now. We had some issues with the questions.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Could someone see if you can open the link and see the questions? Sorry, it took me a minute. I was popping between rooms.
So I just opened the link and the only thing I see is the 4 documents, but no questions.
On the link I just posted just a second ago.
Yes. Oh, the second link. Hold on. Let me try that one.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Stacy. I can see the breakout questions.
I see it now. Mhm.
Awesome. Okay, sorry everyone.
It's okay.
We appreciate
Bye.
it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Responsible because it happened on the job.
You think that the employer is responsible or Peter, the painter?
The employer.
The employer, okay?
Yes.
I think, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Darren. I go ahead. Finish your thought.
Okay, I'm going to raise my hand.
Yeah, same here.
I think Peter is responsible because he is an independent contractor. I mean, that's my, I don't know all the intangibles of being an independent contractor.
As a protection, but who knows? Hi there.
Hi.
Yeah.
You all had access to the questions, all right? Do you have the questions?
Yep, we're on. Getting to number 5. How long should we stay out or come back? Do you know?
From the time we started, we had about 20 minutes. So
Oh, really?
whenever we first started.
We're about done. Yeah. So.
Yeah, we're
Okay,
just about just looking at that fifth one.
Okay, I'll let everyone know. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Question is whether or not there maybe the employer bears some responsibility if there's a safety issue concern or a safety concern. Was this person
reading it different?
Hi, I'm just checking in to see if you all have access to the questions. I know some didn't have access to the document.
I didn't, but Diana's reading them, so that works for me.
Fantastic. Okay, I'll put it in the chat just in case you want a copy too, and then I'll leave you alone.
That's okay.
Thanks.
rather of that accident, but I think the employer bears some responsibility in ensuring that it's a safe work environment if they're going to have employees working up on the roof.
These are all very good points. I'm not giving anybody the answer, even though I'm in your room, but because we're going to talk about it. But you can see even amongst us, right? There's
also, I wonder if the
for 4 months and can't stand for 8 hours.
Yeah.
So, or you could have a person ready to pop that can stand for a full 20 hours. I mean, it doesn't.
So in that case, do you think it would be, it's up to Peter to, I mean, he's the one who accepted the terms of the working conditions. So it was up to him to say, yes, I'll work.
Application because of her criminal record. Is this legal?
Well, you can't deny the interview because of the felony, and you can't
not
a felony on the application.
Yeah, not anymore.
Yeah, not anymore. So you can't do that.
And if they're denying her because of her criminal background, they have to then
There'll be a poll and each person can put their own answers, but this is really just a chance for folks to discuss a little bit. Any other thoughts about this one? Or is this an issue you've seen in some capacity?
In our breakout discussion, we brought up that there is regulation if the employer is stating the terms of when a person works or scheduling that sort of thing, that they're no longer considered a subcontractor, and then they would be, the employer would be responsible for the injury.
Awesome. Andrew, where do you work?
Division of Rehabilitation Services in Jacksonville.
Oh, wonderful.
Good.
All right, let's go on to the second one, unless there's anybody else wants to say something about that. So would somebody do me the favor of reading the second scenario case study, please, with Jeremy? You should see the Word document. Folks have it?
I'll read through.
Thank you.
Jeremy waits tables at Olive Italiano restaurant in Peoria. His shift starts at 11 a.m., but his manager insists he arrive by 10:45 so that a station is ready for the lunch service. Is Olive Italiano required to pay Jeremy for his extra 15 minutes? A, yes, they are required to pay Jeremy. B, no, they're not required to pay Jeremy.
What do folks think?
I think that they have to pay extra time for that. You know, maybe within 5 minutes earlier, it will probably be fine, but they are requiring something else besides, you know, getting ready the area. That's work. So I think that they should pay for that time.
Anybody else?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Okay. When I worked at AT&T at a call center, I guess their computers, you know, they were older computers. This were the year 2000 to 2010. And the computers were a little older than now. And so they would take a little time to reboot, especially if they got older. So, you know, so we start our shift at whatever time, 8 o'clock in the morning. And then but the computers would be ready by, I don't know, 8:02, 8:03, maybe 8:04. And they said, no, you're supposed to be on the call, you know, ready to rock and roll at 8 o'clock. And so you got to get here on time and start up your computer, which meant, 3, 4, 5 minutes before our shift. So that was a big fight we had with our union. Our union fought for us, IBEW Local 21. And we made a big stink about it. And we said, no. You cannot force us to work unless you're going to pay us. And even then, these shifts have been, collectively bargained for. And so I think, I'm pretty sure the company backed down. But, they give you with, the bosses give you with one hand and take away with the other. So, but on that, on that point, we won. So that's my 2 cents.
Moises, I'm like so appreciative because that example is exactly, your story is exactly where I'm going with this case study, right? It doesn't really matter if it's a call center or a restaurant. This sorts of things happens, every day all over the place, right? And so while it may be just seem like, 3 or 4 minutes or 15 minutes, that's not very much, right? Over the course of a week, a month, that adds up. That is wage theft. That is one of the forms of wage theft, right? It's what we call nickel and diming. I am not supposed to be giving you guys the answers. I have something to say about this one with Jeremy. I mean, the other thing I want you guys to be thinking about is perhaps what are some of the risks involved with saying something? Why do workers not speak up? What are ways that Jeremy could be protecting himself? Hopefully he's taken my class before or taken a class with one of you all or sat in some training. And so he knows that he's supposed to be paid. How can he be enforcing that right and proving that this happened to him? Like Moises, for you guys, how did you thankfully had a union representing you, but how did you, how were you able to win that grievance?
Yeah, that was a, unions won't just do it on their own volition unless, it's something to their purview where they're always collectively, organizing or bargaining for. And these little things, you have to really bring it up with your union and say, listen, we should have a grievance. We were a pretty tight-knit group there at AT&T, and we would talk among each other and have a nice little caucus of people, troublemakers, and would say, listen, this can't be. We can't be allowed to, they can't allow to be doing this to us and making us work more for nothing. And so, so we got together first among ourselves and said, let's go to the union, where there's unity, there's power. So we would unite first, a core group, go to the union, and then tell them we should do a grievance here. We have to fight this. And that was part of the organizing.
Oh, awesome. Great. So, I mean, what I took away from your, sorry, Darren. I was just going to say what I took away, Moises, from your story is a very successful strategy was that it was a group of you doing it, right? It wasn't just one of you. I think with all these situations, if it's just one person trying to do it, it's very challenging. But I would imagine if all of Italiano is doing this to Jeremy, they're probably doing it to some of his colleagues, right? Darren, what were you going to say?
Well, I was about to piggyback on that a little bit because when you do that as a group, when you confront the issue as a group, it has more power. And I think the employer pretty much gets the message at that point that everybody's on the same page and either I'm going to stop doing this or we're just going to have to fight through the union. So, yeah, group activity, probably the best way to go about it.
Awesome. Okay, apparently the other groups are much quicker than we are. It's probably because I'm talking. So let's move on. We'll read the third one. If we don't get in our group, if we don't get to all of them, it's okay, because we're going to be going through all of them as a large group as well. So the third one is also about Jeremy. A global pandemic plus polar vortex mean that most of Olive Italiano's business has switched to takeout orders. Jeremy no longer has tables to wait and is helping package customer orders. Before the pandemic, Jeremy was paid a tip sub-minimum wage in addition to his tips. Can his employer continue doing this now? Yes, no, or depends. Thoughts? So tipped workers, at least in Illinois, can be paid a sub-minimum wage that is less than the minimum wage wherever they're working. And if a lot of times, a lot of servers get that tip minimum wage and bartenders, and then they make most of their salary based on their tips. But if he's not getting tips, what's the employer's responsibility?
Well, I could share with you my experience. So during that pandemic, there is a small ice cream eatery, you know, because I prepare drinks and things like that. And the employer, every time that they brought a bill, they ask for tips. So we all have to tip. And, you know, it's all to go. You can see it, but, you know, outside probably, but mostly it's all to go. But they request tips. And it wasn't like, could you tip us? No, they just put it on their screen, add the tip. But if they don't give a tip, they can't work at sub-minimum wage. So they'll have to come up with a regular wage. I think that that's fair. That's my opinion.
So I gave you the option of putting depends for this one because we don't know, you know, I think that most of us probably have had the experience during the last year where if we were getting takeout, that exact same thing happened, right? Where you get your receipt and it's still asking for tips and you're like, okay, well, maybe I didn't used to tip on takeout orders before, but I'm going to now, right? Uncle Joe's been sending all of us money. He said, spend it at your local businesses, right? So perhaps on takeout orders, Jeremy he's doing just fine getting tips. We don't know, right? But I mean, that's why like these all really, it comes down to the details in all of these. Ashley, should we get back to big group? Okay, sorry guys, we didn't get through all. Next time we break into small groups, I am not your small group facilitator, okay? Somebody else needs to step up. Andrew, I'm looking at you.
Hey, I had my own.
Darren, I would be looking at you if I could see your face.
Okay. Yeah, we got through our questions.
Oh, you were in the other group to start
and
with.
came back, yeah.
Oh. Okay. All right. My little small group, it's not my group. The group I was in, somebody wants to remind me that when we go through the quiz questions as the whole group, that I would love to spend 30 seconds doing a PSA on this question number 3. Just making sure folks know the history about why it is we have sub-minimum wages in this country, because it's a pretty messed up history. And I'm a teacher, so make sure y'all know your history too, right? How can I tell when everybody's back? Oh, I see.
Aren't you interested in coming over here?
Oh my gosh, I'm interested in going anywhere that is not my house. What
Great,
the
Allison.
goal of all this is to make hundreds of Allisons across the state. So everybody.
It looks like everyone is back in the room now. Sorry to interrupt you. Just want to let you know. And just a heads up, your screen share is down.
Thank you. Yep. All right. Welcome back, everyone. How was the small groups?
It was
some
great.
friends?
Good,
Good.
Cool.
good.
I can't see everybody.
Great.
I'm happy to hear people talking. Thank you. It like brings me a lot of joy. I know most of you have probably conducted some of these webinars over Zoom, and it is painful and challenging. And I am a teacher who likes to be in the classroom in person. So I appreciate it. What we're gonna do, 150, we're gonna go over case study 1. And that one is pretty complex. And so I would love to kind of get into the weeds with that one. And then at 2:10, we're gonna take a 5-minute break, okay? So let's do a poll that asks case study 1, and everybody, you know, even if you came to different conclusions in your small groups, answer the poll however you want to answer it. So question again, Ryan, so this was about Ryan, who's got the painting company. He says Peter's responsible for his medical bills because Peter's an independent contractor. What do you think?
And Allison, as we're getting everyone's polls coming in, just that heads up, your screen share is still down. Yeah, no worries.
Can you see it now?
Yep. Perfect.
Now I can't see the poll.
So we're going to leave the poll open for about another 20 seconds, letting the last couple people put in their vote. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share the results.
All right, so just over 2/3 of you believe that Peter's not responsible, but a third, just shy of a third, think that he is responsible. So you all, the professionals who do this work on a daily basis, right? We have some pretty stark division just in how we're answering it. And so you can only imagine what things would be like for the job seekers that are looking for the services of your agency, right? And the answer is no, Peter is not responsible. But this is purposely a complicated question, okay? And so we're going to go over some of the intricacies here. I want folks to know that in sorry, I'm just trying to I have all the little boxes open and it's so hard sometimes to navigate it. A study was done, I didn't work on it, another study by some colleagues was done a few years ago that looked at misclassification in construction industry in Illinois and tried to measure it. And it showed that upwards of 50% of construction workers in Illinois, union, non-union, residential, commercial, were at some point during their career misclassified as independent contractors when legally they should be employees. And so the question is why does that happen? What can workers do? I think, this happens not just in construction, it happens in lots and lots of industries, but construction is a very, very stereotypical industry where this is going to happen, especially in residential construction, because of, the economics of it. It's a lot cheaper for an employer to hire independent contractors as opposed to employees. And so these are all the different issue areas I've listed here that are covered, worker rights issues that are covered in this one case study. One thing I forgot to have you all do in your small groups, apologies, I forgot I put this directions, is that I want folks to think about, with each of these case studies, to be thinking about also what are potential documenting strategies that the workers in each scenario can employ in order to protect themselves. Because these cases all kind of vary in difficulty, how difficult it would be to enforce your right. But the one thing that's pretty universal is that if it's the worker's word versus the employer's word, the worker most likely is not going to be successful, that they need some sort of proof, something in order to prove their case. And so that's, I think, whenever I'm teaching worker rights generally to a group of workers, the thing that I stress more than anything else is a real good examination and good discussion of some of the different documenting strategies, because laws constantly change. Administrations that enforce those laws constantly change. I mean, just in the decade that I've been at the U of I, we've had, this is the third different presidential administration. And so under the Obama administration, the US Department of Labor was very, like paid a lot of attention to these issues and you know, was pretty responsive to different worker rights claims. Under the Trump administration, not so much. And, you know, the same thing could be, it has happened here in Illinois, kind of looking at the differences between Governor Quinn's administration, Governor Rauner, and Governor Pritzker. And this is not to get into the weeds about politics and all that. It just is really fact-based information on amounts of resources that are being spent on enforcement. So that being said, the thing that's universal throughout all these times is that the strategies for protecting yourselves are going to stay pretty much the same. And so those are the things that I think are important to stress when you're talking to workers, is getting them into the habit of employing some of these documenting strategies. So some of the questions that I think about when I'm looking at a case study like this is, you know, the first one being, obviously, is Peter an independent contractor or an employee, and how do you know, and why does this matter? Does anybody want to jump in real quick and just talk about, like, just share, can they unmute themselves and just share why?
I think he's
how
an
do you
employee
know?
because they're telling him when to show up.
So the employer,
He has control, the
Ryan is
company has
controlling
control.
his schedule, right? He's saying you
Right.
need to show up Monday morning at 8 a.m. If Peter was, you know, legally an independent contractor, Peter would have the ability to say, you know, we can't even start this week. I'm not going to be able to be there till next Wednesday, and I need to take Friday off, right? Independent contractor controls their own schedule. What else? Thank you for that. How else can we tell that Peter's an independent, I'm sorry, that Peter's an employee?
He's, he's using the scaffolding from Ryan.
Yeah, so he's using Ryan's equipment, absolutely, right? Independent contractors typically bring their own tools and equipment. Anything else?
And that he's setting the, Ryan is setting the pay scale. As somebody from Chicago Federation of Labor, you can't tell me $15 is a painter. I'm not sure what the painters is, but I'm quite sure the scale is much larger than that. So he must be an employee for me to come in at that rate, because if I was a union person, I couldn't.
Sure. But even, like, you know, I come from family that, like, I have a lot of family members that work in construction, and I know that even like the union tradespeople that are in my family, like at times when they were on the bench for their union, they would just take, you know, side jobs doing residential construction, whatever. And oftentimes, you know, when they did those jobs, they would be considered independent contractors. But like you said, $15 an hour is very cheap for this kind of work. It's certainly not any sort of union scale. But the fact that Ryan is setting the wage is a clear indication that Peter is an employee. It would be different if Peter said, hey, like, looking at this job, it's going to cost you $1,500, you know, something like that. But because Ryan is controlling the schedule, providing the tools, and setting the pay rate, those are like the three tests pretty much that are a good clue that Peter should legally be an employee. So we answered that. We know that Peter legally should be employee. Why does this matter? Why is it better in this scenario where Peter was injured? Why is it better for him to be an employee?
Hospital bills.
I mean, he's got, what did I say? What happened to him? He he broke his ankle, right?
Right.
He doesn't
Right.
want to be paying for that. And workers' compensation insurance is the system that's in place that all employers, regardless if you have 1 employee or 10,000 employees, it's a system in place that is supposed to take care of workers if they get sick or injured on the job. And it's a no-fault system. And so, I mean, it's basically, it's the history behind it in a nutshell is that like this is the grand compromise that was reached between workers and employers 100 years ago. Because before that, it was just the Wild West. Workers were being injured, and some of them, you know, would sue or bring private action against their employers, but most of them, you know, didn't do anything. That is still the case today in 1 state. Does anybody have any idea what is the 1 state that doesn't have a legal requirement that employers carry workers' compensation?
Florida.
Missouri?
Missouri?
That's Florida.
Florida? Good guesses, good guesses. Texas. So in
I didn't hear-
Texas,
Oh,
so
okay.
a lot of employers do carry workers' comp, but they don't have to. And so that's really problematic when you think about Texas, a growing state, a big state, a state with a huge immigrant population. You think about who's working these construction jobs, how lucky or how likely it would be that some worker who perhaps is, you know, their immigration status is in question and all that is going to speak up and say something, right? So what I like to do with these scenarios, and this is the only one that I think we're going to get into this kind of the weeds with, but I like to kind of change it up and think about kind of work through it with my students. So we've already established that Peter legally should be employed. He was injured, he went to the hospital, and you know, now he's got $5,000 worth of hospital bills, but he thankfully has taken a worker rights class, and so he knows that he should be entitled to workers' comp. So he has Ryan's phone number and he calls him, but the phone's been disconnected. And he looks up Fast and whatever they're called, Fast and Easy Painters. He looks them up in the phone book or on Google, and it doesn't seem to exist. So he has no real way of getting a hold of Ryan. What can he do? What are some options available to him? Any ideas? So these are where, like, you know, that I think you can get into some really, really good discussions with people, because once again, this is a situation that happens not only just in construction, this happens in lots of different industries, right? We have storefront temp agencies that will just shut down overnight and not pay people their last paychecks, right? And so, you know, it could be that he goes and, you know, tries to file a complaint with the Department of Labor, the Illinois Department of Labor, but all he has right now, let's say, is that this man's name is Ryan and he has a bogus company name. If Peter's primary language is Polish and Ryan only speaks English, and they didn't have very detailed conversations, you know, collecting information from each other, it might be difficult for Peter to provide the type of information that the Department of Labor needs in order for them to pursue a claim against Ryan. So this is where it's so important that you help folks think about how they can be collecting information, documenting from the jump. So, you know, Peter needs to think about, like, you know, he's being hired in a precarious situation. He knows this. He realizes that it's kind of shady. What can he do possibly to protect himself in the event that something bad were to happen? What could he do if he were undocumented, so he didn't have the legal permission to work in this country? What happens if Ryan hired him from the Home Depot parking lot? I don't know about in other places in Illinois, but certainly in Chicagoland, there are different, you know, Home Depots and Lowe's where you will see a group of workers gathering in the parking lot looking for work, day laborers, right? There is a very famous day labor site where Polish painters congregate, and there's other ones where other immigrants congregate. Do those workers who are hired from Home Depot parking lot, do they have less rights because of where they were hired, or perhaps because they're undocumented?
They don't have less rights, but if they don't make sure that they have some sort of documentation, then they give themselves less rights. Okay, and that seems to be the problem, that it's not the employer is not only working against them, but the employee is working against himself.
Absolutely. So, it's what I the first thing you said is spot on, that they don't have less rights. They absolutely have the same rights. I mean, for the most part, there's little asterisks next to everything I say, guys. Apologies that I can't go too much into the weeds, but generally they have the same amount of rights that employment and labor laws cover all workers in this country, regardless of immigration status. And the reason that is not because like our governments want to encourage undocumented workers, but it's because recognizing that we have, upwards of 12 or 13 million undocumented workers in this country, that it would be very problematic if there was a different set of rules legally applied to them, right? In terms of their working conditions. It would lower the floor for everybody. Why would a shady contractor hire a US citizen if they could hire somebody who's undocumented and pay them less than the minimum wage, right? We know that happens for sure. And all the reasons why this situation is hard to enforce is because of these details, right? Peter is afraid of speaking up. There is perhaps a language barrier. He's concerned that he, might get deported. I don't know. These are all different reasons why people don't, pursue justice in these kinds of cases, right? But certainly when you're talking about injuries and dangerous working conditions, perhaps the stakes are raised a little bit. And I think that when we're thinking about barriers to enforcing your rights, it's not just something that affects immigrants or folks with without legal authorization to work here, right? There are lots and lots of different barriers. You all know this, right? There actually was there was a news article a few years ago about this temp agency in Chicago, in Little Village, that was busted for all sorts of wage violations and other violations, and they found basically a call order at on the front desk of this storefront temp agency that had a list of who the preferential hires were. So the person who was sitting at that desk, taking workers, documents or getting their information so they could send them for work orders. They had a list of who was the #1 most preferential hire in terms of demographics. Can anybody guess who the most preferential hire was for this very shady temp agency?
I think it was Polish individuals who spoke very little English.
Good guess. I mean, you're pretty close. It was even more detailed than that. It said undocumented young woman, undocumented immigrant young woman. Why would that individual, the undocumented immigrant who's a young female, be the most preferential hire for this temp agency?
I can guess maybe because they are, they consider them more fragile and less likely to fight over. Maybe they work for their family, their children. And women tend to be sometimes a little bit more passive overall if they are like immigrants. Yeah, that's my guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right, right? The thought being that a young woman is more likely to have dependents at home and mouths to feed, right? And so she's going to put up with a lot more abuse than perhaps a man would be. And so the list went down like this. It had the undocumented female, it had the undocumented male. Number 3 was ex-offender female. And I think that I'm bringing this example up because thinking about barriers, right? That returning citizen who has the felony conviction and is having a very hard time finding a job might go to that temp agency. So that ex-offender female is, just 2 notches down from the undocumented young woman, right? In terms of like vulnerabilities and, perceived levels of abuses that a company could inflict. We need to take a break, so I'm gonna just say a couple of things, and then I think we can come back to this because I did not get through everything. Ashley, we misjudged how much time we would talk about this. So just to sum it up about Peter, so the things that like I would recommend in this situation is, he needs to be obviously keeping track very closely of his hours. He needs to be, whether it's on his phone or on a paper calendar, it doesn't really matter, just writing down what time he starts, who else is working with him, get their phone numbers. Perhaps he doesn't have Ryan's last name, but one of the guys he's working with does. Other times I have students suggest to me that, maybe he could go back to the homeowner. They should probably have information about Ryan. It's a wonderful suggestion. But, if there's a language barrier, that might be a challenge as well. What ended up happening in this situation, in the real life scenario that I heard from a worker, is that this worker had taken a picture of the contractor's license plate when he was hired at Home Depot. The workers at this day labor site had heard about these kind of scams going around. And so they took it upon themselves to, every time they were getting picked up for jobs, just immediately with their phones, take a picture of license plates. The Illinois Department of Labor will pursue these claims with that information. That license plate is a dang good way of finding someone, right? And so while that might seem a little bit out of the box, given some of the the situations that all of us deal with, the point is to kind of help people think about creatively ways they can protect themselves. What are all the tools at our disposal? And to really recognize that unless you, the worker, are doing it, like nobody else is going to do it for you. In my small group, we talked a little bit about what the union difference is and how like having a union and having your coworkers help you enforce these claims is like the most powerful thing you can do. But for poor Peter, man, he is really, on his own. And so he needs to, use whatever tool he has at his disposal. I think with that, let's take a break, and then we're going to come back to this one because I still want to talk about workers' comp and things, but let's take a 5-minute break. Is that okay, everyone? Okay, we'll come back at 2:19. Okay, Ashley? Or Molly?
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of questions and comments in the chat box. How should we handle those? Do you think is the best point at this point?
So most of the questions have been addressed as you've been going along. There is a couple of questions that have not. So what I would recommend is if I'll go through and I can grab the ones that haven't been answered already. And when we get to the end of this case study, I can flag those for you. So if you want, after each case study, we can pause and see if there are additional questions that have appeared in the chat box.
Apologies, this one we got a little bit behind time. I'm trying to speak slower.
I think we've got plenty of time. So no worries.
To Gloria asking if we leave the session and get back on, I don't think you need to. You could just mute yourself. I think it's probably fine. And then just come back. Oh, I know you can hear me talking. It's because I'm talking. I'm gonna get some water. 219.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It is 2:19. So we're going to go ahead and get started again. Allison, just a heads up, your screen share is down at the moment. And just to let you know, Allison, you are muted.
Apologies. Just to remind everyone, this session does go until 4. I hope people can stay until then. If you can't, I think it's going to be, this is being recorded. And so you could probably see it another time, but also feel free to email me. My email is at the beginning and the end of the PowerPoint, and email is a great way to get a hold of me. So for this question, we'll just go over a couple more things with Peter and Ryan. This yellow slide with all these questions. This is the only time, only scenario where I put up kind of all the different questions that I think you need to think about when you're looking at a scenario like this. And so it's really just for your benefit, but also just the idea being that, like, if you were to use this kind of tool in a job club or something like that, you know, you really want to think like all the gambit of different issues that might be involved in a case study. And these are all like the different kind of questions that I would want to ask the folks that I was talking to, you know, changing up the scenario and such. So we talked about this, kind of the difference between independent contractors, employees, what, you know, that an independent contractor legally is, you know, their own boss. And so this will happen obviously in construction, but also, I mean, there's lots of different jobs. You can think about, you know, even in a hair salon, the person who's renting a booth, that person is likely is an independent contractor. So in all sorts of industries, this happens. When misclassification occurs, is when an employer claims that their worker is an independent contractor when legally they should be an employee. So another example of this would be a cleaning agency that classifies its workers as independent contractors, even though the company sets the work schedules and provides the cleaning equipment. When companies do this, they don't follow many important worker rights laws. They don't have to pay overtime, benefits like, you know, contributing to unemployment, workers' comp we talked about. They don't make deductions for taxes or Social Security. That worker, you know, is supposed to, you know, is another way of calling an independent contractor is a 1099 worker. And, you know, that means that they're going to be losing money and protections of these laws. So another issue to think about with Ryan and Peter is how much money Peter should be entitled to under workers' compensation. There's a really, really good tool that I use, an interactive infographic that ProPublica put out a few years ago on, and it's kind of grossly named, but it's called How Much is a Limb Worth? And it shows you state by state, has a replica of a body. It shows you how much, you know, you click on the different body parts, the leg, the finger, the eye, and it shows you based on what state you're working in, how much that body part is worth. I tell you this, A, because I think it's important to continually like do the education work to help folks understand that, like, you know, this federal system we live in has very different implications, you know, for individual people based on, you know, where they're living, where they're working, obviously. It's also a really good way to get people pissed off or excited or wake up. I have always a class, especially if I'm teaching like some pre-apprentices, you know, like younger people. This is a good way to wake them up, start talking about how much testicles are worth in different states, right? Lots of guys are very interested in that. So there's all that is in the curriculum. You can, if you look at the chapter on health and safety. Sorry. And so this is actually like what's happening to Peter at the end of the day is a form of wage theft. We're going to talk about wage theft in the next one in a little bit more detail. And here we go, just to summarize some of his documenting strategies. So using a calendar, keeping contact information for the work site, the homeowner, coworkers, photo of the contractor license plate, and then also like all the medical bills, hospital records, all those things. And so one thing that I have found very, very helpful is when I'm kicking off these conversations with a group of workers, we go around the room first and kind of talk about where else in our lives we have to do a good job of documenting and like record keeping. And so people talk about, you know, how their medical bills or their their tax forms or whatever it is, their cable bills, that they have a system. And so we make a good list of all kind of the best practices within the room, like collective knowledge, what are good tactics that are working for people. And then just think about how you could do that for a work setting. And I have seen job training programs that have then taken this idea and implemented it into their day-to-day programming. So that job seeker, when they're coming in for job club or for whatever soft skills training that they're doing, they are going through the motions of clocking in, writing down their hours, doing, taking 5 or 10 minutes during the day to do journaling about different issues that they're having with classmates or with instructors or whatever, just to kind of get into the habit of doing all this stuff, because it really is just habit forming, right? And if you start doing it after you have an issue, it's oftentimes too late. So before we get to the next one, I want to make sure that we cover any questions or issues that were in the chat box. Ashley, were there any that we didn't go over?
Yeah, so it looks like we've covered most of them. One that came at the very beginning of today was just around asking if workers' rights violations are even more prevalent during the time of COVID due to people working remotely, just different work schedules.
That's a great question. Yeah, I think, well, shoot, I mean, there's, when you look at any one of these issues, I think we're seeing some very, very, very disturbing situations. I don't know, I can't think offhand of any definite studies that have come out yet that are showing wage theft claims are up X amount, during the last year. I would guess that they're down just because of the number of people that have lost jobs or have had their hours cut, and especially kind of thinking about some of the industries where wage theft is most prevalent. But that being said, you just think about all the health and safety violations that have happened that you all probably have seen in your communities. So the short answer is I would assume that they have, but I don't have any, there hasn't been much proof yet. I will be releasing a study, what is today, Wednesday? On Friday, I did all last year, I worked on a huge survey of just over 1,000 working moms throughout Illinois in all industries and occupations who had school-age children in the past year and were dealing with school closures and then having to try to keep their jobs. And we surveyed them on a whole range of different violations that may have experienced, but also just kind of setbacks in their careers and different things. And so that, I think, captures some of the stories that you're talking about. And that's coming out next week. So maybe when we send out contact information and all that, I'll make sure you all have our website in case anybody's interested about that study. You'll see me in the news a bunch maybe next week. So, all right. So the second one, and we'll put the poll up again. Jeremy waits tables at an Olive Italiano restaurant in Peoria. His shift starts at 11 a.m., but his manager insists he arrive by 10:45 a.m. so that his station is ready for the lunch service. Is Olive Italiano required to pay Jeremy for his extra 15 minutes, for this extra 15 minutes?
So we're going to leave the poll open for about another 10 seconds. So go ahead and get your votes in. Thank you so much, everyone. We're going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results.
All right, so that one we didn't have as much division as the last question, about over 90% of you all thought that Olive Italiano would have to pay him that 15 minutes. I know in my small group, we talked a little bit about how this happens. This is very prevalent, happens in other industries as well. And so this is the kind of example where, you know, it doesn't have to be food service or restaurants you're talking about. It could be lots of different kinds of businesses. So the main issue here is wage theft. And poll, how do we get rid of the poll? It's like in the middle of my screen, I can't see anything. Oh, there we go. Okay. So while it's only 15 minutes and you might say, oh, you know, what's the big deal? It's too much of a headache to try to like argue with the boss. And, you know, you want to make sure, like, I think for most workers, right, you want to be, the restaurant opens, you want to be ready to go. You don't want to be, you know, putting out all the salt and pepper shakers right when customers are coming in. And so recognizing that, right, the restaurant says, sure, yeah, you need to be here early before it starts. But the question is whether or not they have to pay him. And yes, they do. That's work. If they need him to be there, that's work. But too often, you know, workers get their shifts shorted. This happens a lot of times. I had a worker once in my class who, like, just the night before, he was so tired and I was kind of getting annoyed because he kept falling asleep in the class. And during break, he came up and apologized to me, and he said that he worked at Pizza Hut, I guess, because this, now I'm calling no names. He worked at Pizza Hut, and he was a dishwasher, and his shift was supposed to end at like 10 p.m., but the kitchen wasn't cleaned yet, and so his manager made him clock out and then spend another 2 hours washing the dishes. And so that was 2 hours that was stolen from him. And he was like, yeah, you know, I knew it wasn't right, but I was so tired and I don't know what to do anyway. And so, you know, and this was a guy who was like born and raised in this country, right? On that list of vulnerability, he was kind of close to the bottom, and yet this is still happening, right? And so we call this wage theft. This is part of that, you know, $7.3 million that's being stolen from workers every week in Cook County. In that study, we only measured a few forms of wage theft, but we think that there are lots of different ways. And so I'm just gonna read these off quickly, some of the different ways that wage theft happens. It's failure to pay overtime. So that means either paying straight time or just, you know, just paying a flat rate rather than, yeah, so straight time rather than paying time and a half, violating minimum wage laws, misclassifying your employees, taking the illegal deductions. These are ones we've all talked about already. Requiring workers to pay or to work for no pay or to work off the clock, stealing workers' tips. So when you have a job that where folks are getting tips, let's say it's a restaurant, that restaurant legally is allowed to have a system where the workers are pooling their tips, or they have to tip out their busboys or the bar backs or the hosts. Those are all legit. What's not legal is when the manager also has to be tipped out. And this happens. This happens all the time. I worked at a place once where they said that 10% of your tips had to go to the house at the end of the night. And it's like, no way, this isn't gonna work. So stealing workers' tips, not paying workers for training, saying that, you know, you have to have, that there's a week of unpaid training before you officially start. No, that's wage theft. Not paying out or allowing workers to take their accrued PTO, obviously paying workers with checks that bounce, or suddenly closing a business without paying a final check. And so some of these things, I mean, especially when you get to the bottom, it sounds so crazy, but I'm sure you all have heard some horror stories. This stuff, there's a really, really great example in the curriculum of a group of workers in Lincolnwood that worked for a bakery, a commercial bakery that suddenly shut down and didn't pay workers all the money they were owed, and their final checks bounced. But these workers organized and got connected with a worker center. We're going to talk about worker centers, what those are. And they got some media attention and got some help from some local politicians, and they got their money. They weren't able to get the bakery to open again, but they got all the money they were owed at least. They were successful because they did that as a group, right? And they got a lot of public attention on it. When we think about who's at risk for wage theft, you know, it's many of the same vulnerable populations that are at risk for a lot of the different ills in our society, right? So, you know, you just kind of think about who's not going to speak up, or who's going to really weigh the consequences of speaking up. And it does take a level of courage to enforce these rights, because these people get fired all the time for illegal reasons and for enforcing their rights. And so once again, this is where, you know, kind of stressing that it's important for folks to get to know at least their coworkers and think about, you know, when they're experiencing issues, if there are other coworkers that are also experiencing those issues, it would be a good idea to talk to them and try to take action together, file a complaint with the Department of Labor together, because you have just so much more protection when you're doing that as a group. I think that there are certain industries that maintain a culture of wage theft. So I did a study of car washes in Chicago in 2011, 2012, and we interviewed workers at like 2/3 of the car washes in Chicago. And I think we found one that wasn't breaking the law in some way. I mean, it was really, really bad. Like over 90% of them, of the workers we surveyed, were experiencing wage theft, and on top of like very dangerous working conditions with all the chemicals and exposure to the elements and things like that. So there are certain industries where it's not just a few bad apples, it is the culture. I mean, that is how you do business if you're working in that industry. These are also like, you know, when I use that term epidemic, it's because what we're talking about in terms of amounts of money, I mean, it's really astronomical. So this study done by the Economic Policy Institute in 2012 measured wage theft claims to robbery claims nationally. And this is, you think about it, these are just claims too. How many workers have experienced wage theft and don't file a complaint? Probably the vast majority. So this is very low, but yet that figure is still almost 3 times as much as what was reported in robberies for the United States for that year. And so for Jeremy, you know, he really needs to keep very, very, very good track of his hours. He needs to be holding on to his check stubs, and keeping track of hours. You know, it really doesn't have to be anything complicated. It's just as long as you're doing it consistently every single day. You know, it's not good enough to just rely on the company's printout of your hours or the company's app, which tracks your schedules, because the company controls those. The company can change the numbers in them. The company can cut you out the moment you start asking too many questions, right? So you need to do this on your own. Keeping, you know, track of the tips, and then collecting contact information. And these are hard ones to, especially with tip workers. It's hard to really sometimes get folks to enforce these rights, just because a lot of tip workers don't want to declare their tips because they don't want to pay taxes on them. So, you know, I always take the approach that, like, you know, this is education about the law, and, you know, it's up to that individual worker what they're going to do with it, but, you know, at least give them the information so they're aware. All right, next one. Also about Jeremy. A global pandemic plus polar vortex means that most of Alva Italiano's business has switched to takeout orders. Jeremy no longer has tables to wait and is helping package customer orders. Before the pandemic, Jeremy was paid a tips sub-minimum wage in addition to his tips. Can his employer continue doing this now? We'll open up the poll again.
We're going to go ahead and leave this poll open for about the next 20 seconds. So go ahead and get your votes in. And then Allison, just a heads up, before we get started on this, we do have one question from last time that I can give you once the poll is done. We're going to keep the poll open for about 3 more seconds. Go ahead and get your last votes in. All right, thank you so much, everyone. So here are the results.
So a little bit more division on this one. All right, before we dive into this question, what was the issue from the last one that we didn't resolve?
Yeah, so the one question is it legal for an employer to require hourly employees to work overtime and give comp time in lieu of overtime pay?
No. It's not. Hourly employees have to be paid money. Comp time is something that's really only available to workers who are exempt from overtime, like so salaried workers. Good question.
Thanks, Allison. And just a quick reminder to everyone else, as we're going along, if you have questions, please feel free to put those into the chat box. We'll pause after each session or each section to then cover those questions. All right, Allison, back to you.
So as you could predict, when depends is one of the answer choices, probably the answer is depends. And so it really has to do with how much Jeremy potentially was earning in tips from those takeout orders. So I know in my small group, we talked a little bit about how, that's something that's just become practice now during the pandemic, is that, you tend to tip on takeout orders, right? Because you know that folks aren't earning tips like they normally would, right? So it depends on how much he's getting in tips. So this question has to do with minimum wages. And I just wanted to take a minute to talk about all the different types of minimum wages we have. So minimum wage, by definition, is the lowest amount per hour an employer can pay a worker. Federal minimum wage is still $7.25, sets the floor for US workers. But then, different levels of government can pass their own minimum wage laws. And so in Illinois, we have a higher minimum wage, but because we're a home rule state, that means that cities and counties can also pass laws that are even more stringent than the states. We also have some minimum wages for some workers. So workers under the age of 18 in Illinois, tip workers, and some workers with disabilities can be paid sub-minimum wages. And so this is extremely problematic, and there's a huge effort nationwide, but also in Illinois, called One Fair Wage to eliminate sub-minimum wages and make sure that all workers, regardless of whether or not they get tips, are paid the floor minimum wage, whatever it is where they work. And the reason why is because this system of sub-minimum wages inherently invites discrimination. You think about what it is a worker needs to do in order to get good tips. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to do with doing their job right. There are a whole lot of reasons why a worker would not get a good tip. I know, as someone who I worked many, many tip jobs over the years, and I likely, if I went back to some of my best bartending jobs, wouldn't make half as much money as I made 20 years ago, because 20 years ago, I was willing to put up with a lot more BS. And, now I would just get incredibly annoyed and be very snarky with the customers. So, I mean, I guess then but it would have nothing to do with how delicious the drinks I was serving were, right? And so it invites sexual harassment and invites discrimination based on race and ethnicity and gender and age. California doesn't have sub minimum wages. And so, you know, all workers in that state, regardless if they work in a restaurant and get and earn tips, also get paid the minimum wage. And just a little history, I told my group, to remind me, in case I forgot, I wanted to give you guys a 30-second history on sub minimum wages and why it is we have that system. And I like to add these like little, like pepper my lectures when I'm talking to workers with these history notes, because this is a history that for the most part we're not taught, right, in school. And so when the first minimum wage laws were passed on the national level in the 1930s under President Roosevelt, a huge concession was made in order to get the approval of the Southern legislators that were needed to vote yes, so that Congress would pass these minimum wage laws. And what these Southern legislators wanted in return for their yes votes were some exemptions to minimum wage laws. And so huge groups of workers were just exempted blanketly from minimum wage laws. One of them were domestic workers. One of them were agricultural workers, and one of them were tipped workers. And so you think about who was working agricultural, domestic, and tip jobs in the South in the 1930s, right? It was for the most part Black workers, some Mexican workers, but these were who, you know, these Southern politicians wanted to keep, you know, to keep, you know, in like legally in their own like caste system, right? Keep in their place. And so 80 years later, this is still the case. And so most of these workers are exempt from, and they're certainly still exempt from federal minimum wage laws. Some states, Illinois, in Illinois, domestic workers have to be paid the minimum wage and have to be paid overtime. Agricultural workers have their own other set of rules that are pretty terrible, but we still have the sub minimum wages for tip workers in Illinois. And so that's just kind of, you know, on your bucket list of things that need to happen, changes that we need in the State House, this would be one of them. So this is a good cheat sheet that you all can print out if you want, that is up to date, that shows what the minimum wages are in Illinois in 2021. These little asterisks next to the $13 an hour wage, minimum wage in Cook County is because since we have the home rule law in Illinois, about 3/4, if not more, of the municipalities, of like the 120 municipalities in Cook County opted out of the higher minimum wage and out of the paid sick leave provision that was passed by the county when these laws were passed. And so I live in Evanston, which is just outside of Chicago. We have the higher minimum wage, and Skokie next to us has the higher minimum wage, but Lincolnwood, you know, 10 minutes down the road does not have the higher minimum wage. And so you can only imagine, like, if for all of us, this is a little bit cumbersome, that individual worker who's looking for a minimum wage job certainly isn't going to know this information. And when you're looking at the minimum wage posters on the employee board, you know, it's going to have a whole bunch of different information. There isn't one poster that has all this stuff. If you look then also at like the states surrounding us, you see that they're all Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, they're still at the federal minimum wage level, $7.25 an hour. So that's pretty significant. You know, we're gonna, by next year, I'm sorry, the Illinois minimum wage is going up to 15. So 2023, why am I like totally blanking on when the Illinois minimum wage will get up to 15? Anyway, we'll all get to 15 eventually, but even I think most of us are recognizing that 15 isn't quite enough, and that there are all sorts of problems that happen when you raise minimum wages. In a lot of industries, wages are raised, but then hours are cut. And so that worker ends up still coming home with less pay. And so it's, you know, pretty complicated solutions to all that. We're going to talk a little bit more about it, but just to let you know, these are all the different minimum wages. There's also this youth wage I put here. That's for under 18. I've certainly heard many anecdotes of different places in Chicago where that difference is $4 an hour now. That there will be places that are getting rid of all their older workers and only hiring youth workers. And by older workers, I mean 18 and older. They're just hiring high school students, right? So that's illegal and problematic. And so for Jeremy, you know, he needs to just like, once again, it's the same things as with the being, you know, shorted time. He needs to be keeping track of his hours, his check stubs, his tips, contact info, and so on. Are there any questions about that one before I move on? With the tip, I'm sorry, Ashley, what?
I was going to say, no, it doesn't look like any questions. Just a heads up, 2025 is when the Illinois minimum wage will go up to 15.
Thank you, 2025. I was being optimistic and said 2023. One thing I didn't mention with the sub-minimum wages is that the idea with the sub-minimum wage is that you're supposed to legally, as long as you earn at least whatever the minimum wage is in that locality, between the sub-minimum wage and your tips, you know, the law is not being broken. But in that case, with, you know, polar vortex and no indoor dining, it would be, you know, we didn't know based on the question, right, whether or not he was earning enough in tips to at least make minimum wage. But in the event that somebody was not making at least the minimum wage, the owner or the restaurant would have to pay that difference. Okay. Brianna is 7 months pregnant and works as a cashier at Dollar Commander in Kankakee. Her OBGYN says she cannot be on her feet for an 8-hour shift. Can she be fired for not being able to stand and operate her cash register? Open the poll.
Going to wait about 10 more seconds as we have the last couple votes coming in. Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
All right, so that one we're pretty good on. This is clearly illegal discrimination, right? We have pregnant workers cannot be legally discriminated against. Oops, sorry. So where I would go with a question like this is, you know, presenting a situation like Brianna's that's pretty, you know, evident. Most folks realize that this is, you know, you can't just fire somebody because they can't do that job that she needs to be accommodated, right? Like she needs to have her register lowered and given a chair, or she needs to be transferred to some other job duty where she doesn't have to be on her feet, right? That's reasonable. The problem is that most of the time when illegal discrimination happens at work, it's not this evident, right? Her employer, Dollar Commander, is going to find some pretext, some other reason to fire her. that looks legal on the surface, but is actually based on reasons that are illegal. They want to get rid of her because she's pregnant. So yeah, so she, like I said, she needs to be accommodated. These are all, we have a law in Illinois, the Illinois Pregnancy Accommodation Law. And so employers must allow pregnant women who want to work during pregnancy reasonable job accommodations, such as to take more frequent bathroom breaks, to get help with heavy work or limit lifting. I want to show you, I think we should have time. I'm going to show you a very quick video that I like to show my students because I think it highlights these, the different ways that employers kind of sneakily get around these laws. And so, you know, what I would say is that Dollar Commander, if they want to get rid of Brianna, they're not going to say, oh, you know, it's because you're pregnant or you can't do your job. That's why we're firing you. No, they're going to wait to the one day that she comes home. I'm sorry, the one day that she comes back from her lunch late and fire her then for being late. And so then if you ask that question of your students or your job seekers, they might change their answer. You do the same poll and people say, oh, okay, well, that's legit. They're firing her because she's late. But it's not necessarily legal to do that either, right? If the reason why, if firing her because she's late is just a pretext for the illegal discrimination, it's still illegal. So in that case, Brianna really needs to think about how else she could prove the illegal discrimination. And that's what I want to get to when we watch this video right now.
Confessions continues. Now,
I just want to make sure, can everybody hear it? Can you see it? Ashley? Yep.
Deborah Roberts with confessions from the corner office.
You describe yourself, Mr. Dupre. Not a workhorse. If you're looking for a Clydesdale, I'm probably not your man. Incidentally, what's your policy on Columbus Day? We work.
Really? Between you, me, and Dupree, most of us know the wrong things to say in a job interview.
My resume.
In her book, Corporate Confidential, former company hatchet woman Cynthia Shapiro reveals that what you don't know could not only prevent you from getting hired, but could get you fired. You are essentially giving all those dirty little secrets that HR does not want us to know.
They're definitely dirty. They're not always so little.
And they can be sneaky. If you see family photos on the interviewer's desk and start bonding over having kids, you may have fallen into a secret trap.
There's an HR director that I know, and when you come in for the interview, she's got a picture of 2 adorable little kids that are facing you in the interview. She doesn't have kids.
This is a trick.
What she has is an edict from upper management to not hire moms.
So if you start talking about your children, she knows right away to strike you off the list.
Exactly right.
That's terrible.
And you'll never know.
And there's even a secret backup plan that might keep moms from getting hired. The let me walk you back to your car trick.
They're looking to see if you have a baby seat in the back.
Aha, so they come
Which
over here and
these people do.
and that could cost you the job.
That will cost you the job.
But even if you land the job, Shapiro says prepare for a game of survival where only your boss knows the rules. Violate them and you may end up on the dreaded top secret layoff list. There really are layoff lists?
Yes, there are secret. Yes, there are secret layoff lists.
She confesses that all kinds of things can get you on the layoff list, including, get this, your vacation plans.
Piker asked how much vacation time you get in the first year. Vacation time? Want vacation time? Go teach 3rd grade public school.
But if you don't work in a boiler room like the guys in this film, and you actually get 2 weeks of vacation, Shapiro says no one tells you that you probably shouldn't take them all at once.
Companies move too fast. They'll find a way around you in 2 or 3 weeks, and they'll realize they can do without you, and they will.
And watch out for those Mai Tais and margaritas on your not longer than 1 week vacation.
Trim the fat around here. Trim the, what do you mean by trim the fat? I want you to fire the fat people.
Like in the movie, there are horrible bosses, Shapiro says, who put you on that layoff list simply for how you look, especially if you're looking too old.
Only executives get to have gray hair. It's not fair, but that's how it goes.
You want to look good, but not too good. Deborah Lee Lorenzana claims she was fired by Citibank because they thought her sexy looks were too distracting, even though she wore business clothes.
The worst feeling was knowing that HR was not there to help me, but to help Citibank.
Citibank insists Lorenzana was let go for poor job performance.
What's under that jacket? You're pregnant, have been for a while. So unfortunately didn't tell us because you would have found out that we thought it's great.
Really? And believe it or not, Shapiro says being pregnant isn't always celebrated, as in this scene, even though there are laws to protect women from being fired.
That's what people like me were paid, big bucks to do, to find the gray areas around the laws that would allow the companies to do what they want to do.
Which is what 25-year-old Tess Adams says happened to her. She'd recently had a stellar performance evaluation when she was suddenly fired for cause. Her bosses said she was a poor employee. Why do you think you were fired?
I think I was fired because I was pregnant.
Do you think that maybe it was related to your work?
There's no way. No way. I never had a complaint until I told him I was pregnant.
In fact, Shapiro says the dirtiest secret of all is that companies rarely tell employees the real reason they wound up on the layoff list, for fear of being sued for wrongful termination.
We're going to need to go ahead and move you downstairs into storage B.
No, I suppose I could
some new people coming in.
If your office space changes for the worst, like in this film, maybe you're being managed out. A clever way companies get rid of unwanted employees, along with dead-end projects. It's all about building a paper trail, proving you're a poor worker.
The HR people are going to kill me for disclosing this on TV, but they will create documentation that makes the employee look like they're not doing their job.
They fake documentation?
They create it. It's all how you look at it, right?
Shapiro says she was fed up with all that deception, so she quit her high-paying HR job and became a whistleblower. Today, she's on the other side of the fence.
Is there an area the company is guiding you towards?
Using her insider knowledge to counsel workers on getting ahead in the workplace. As for her best tip for staying off that company blacklist,
I can't see it.
even if your boss is like a devil wearing Prada.
All right. I think you guys hopefully got where I was going with that. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find my PowerPoint. Actually, I lost my PowerPoint.
Would you like me to screen share on my side?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
One moment. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you go ahead? Next slide. So here, once again, Brianna kind of thinking about, I think in that video, why I like it is because they do a good job of highlighting all the different ways, kind of tactics shady employers use. And here's where, you can really think about in exercises you're doing on interviewing strategies, this would be a great time to talk about these kinds of things. And so here are just like all the different things that she should do, including keeping track of what's in her personnel file. In Illinois, we have the right to review our personnel file twice a year and make copies of what's in there. And so that is something that's a good idea to get into the habit of doing. The one woman who was pregnant in the film clip who said that she was fired for poor performance, but that she had like just had a review and it was excellent. That review is her documenting strategy. I mean, even if you just have your picture on the wall as employee of the month, have the worker take a photo of that. All these things just add to your folder for protecting yourselves. Okay, move ahead.
Jeff, a heads up, we do have a question before we head into the next case study. And the question is, does this same idea apply to a male cashier who has knee pain and doctors say cannot stand for 8 hours?
Oh, absolutely, right? So that would be under the ADA, Americans with Disability Act. That worker needs to be accommodated, right? There are very few jobs where you can't have some sort of accommodation. If legit there are any ways you can accommodate a worker, in that job duty, given the disability or given the pregnancy, then that they could potentially be laid off. But for the most part, there should be, different ways, whether it's rotating positions, things like that. Thank you. Any other questions?
Nope, that's it.
Can you move forward? Chandra has a felony conviction from 15 years ago for stealing some clothes from a store. She has been out of work for a while and feels that she never receives calls back from her job applications because of her criminal record. Is this legal? Put the poll up.
Okay.
Let me see if I can.
We're going to leave this open for about another 10 seconds. Thank you everyone for voting. Here are the results.
So here's a pretty even split. This was a trick question, guys. Can you see my screen now?
No.
Why not? Sorry, let me try again. I've had it. Found it. Here we go. Now?
Allison, go. You want to try? There you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
So the key thing in wording in this question that made this illegal was the fact that she never receives calls back from her job applications. It's that job applications part, which is why this is likely illegal. And that is because we have a law that was passed in, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. It was the last law, I think, that Governor Quinn signed called Ban the Box. And that made it so that job applications in Illinois now no longer can have a box or some sort of question that asks about somebody's criminal, like whether or not they have a felony conviction. Now, it's important to realize that they still have the right to discriminate against that worker if they have a criminal record, if they find that out later. So once they get to the job interview or at any other point, if they find out, then they can fire that worker for that reason. But the reason why this Ban the Box campaign and law are so important is because so many people were just being kept out of even having the opportunity to get the job interview, like this woman, Chandra, because that box was checked, right? So many employers are just going to completely throw away those applications, not even give folks a chance to explain, all the things they've done in the past 15 years and reasons why they're qualified for a job. So that box isn't supposed to be there yet. All the time when I collect job applications, when I'm, just out and about, I see that box is still there. So if you know of a place that still has that on their job applications, it might be a good idea to inform them that they're breaking the law and also report it to the Illinois Department of Labor. So now we're going to take a 5-minute break. So it's 3:10 right now. Let's come back at 3:15, and then we're going to get into breakout rooms again, okay? So when we come back, I'll give you the directions. So come back at 3:15, please.
Hi, this is Jen, the interpreter. Can you make sure to spotlight my colleague, Donna?
Yes, I will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Molly. Oh, okay, never mind.
Hi, I'm here.
I wanted to make sure that we were all came together again as a big group before we did the breakout rooms.
Yes, sorry, I just messaged Ashley. I got too click happy and I clicked it too soon. So yeah, everyone's back in the main room.
Okay, I think we can come back. Before we break into breakout rooms, I just wanted to make sure there weren't any questions from that last case study. Actually,
Nope, not seeing any that have come through.
okay. Oops, sorry. Okay, so we're gonna go into breakout rooms again. This time, I would like it if folks spent about 15 minutes discussing in your groups what are the worker rights issues that you think most affect your clients or job seekers or just the populations you serve. We only covered, what, I think half a dozen different issues with those scenarios. There are a lot of other things that are included in that curriculum that I showed you all that I didn't discuss. So, you know, you can think broadly. I'd like you also to discuss if there are areas in your day-to-day programming where you think you could include some worker rights information. So where could you plug in this stuff? Is it in activities? Is it conversations, one-on-one? I mean, be specific as you can. And then also just thinking about and discussing if you have any concerns or reservations about talking about these issues, kind of in the broader context of the workforce development work. Are you concerned about perceptions from employer partners, or that workers are going to take this information and like go wild and everybody's going to go on strike? I don't know. But you know, maybe this is a good time to talk about that as well, because I totally understand concerns people might have. So let's break out into breakout rooms, and we will come back I think just after 3:30 or so. Right.
Sounds great. So just that quick reminder to everyone, inside of the chat box, I have both attached the Word document that has these questions on it. I've also put the questions themselves into the chat box. I know that when I went around earlier, some of you said your firewall wouldn't allow you to download the document. So you can also just copy them from here. So before we open up the breakout rooms, I just want to give you a moment to go ahead and grab that information. Just that quick reminder, if you run into any issues or you have any questions, please feel free to hit the help button when you're inside your breakout room, and either Allison, myself, or Molly will pop over. All right, so with that, we will see you just after 3:30.
Okay, I'll open up the breakout rooms.
Thanks, Molly.
So this is the same situation as last time. Anyone who is in this room, this is also a breakout room. So feel free to just go ahead and jump into the questions.
Let's see. How many? Oh, there's 10 people in here with the interpreter. I guess, well, actually, there's 2 interpreter channels. So 2 Jen Millers. There's about 4 or 5 people in here. Yes?
Yeah, so did any of these issues that we talked about resonate? Are these things that the folks you work with deal with?
Yeah, I mean, I posted earlier that I've been wanting to, I mean, maybe I should say it like this. I would have talked about these issues from the get-go, ever since I started working at where I work, Central State SER, community-based organization, nonprofit. I would have immediately talked about these things because I am passionate about workers' rights. I've been a member of the Chicago Teachers Union, IBEW Local 21. Another union where I was doing ESL teaching at the city colleges asked me, is that union right there? So yes, I had a lot of history in unions, some pretty good ones, probably the strongest one in Chicago, local one in CTU. So yes, I wanted to share everything because I was, but it wasn't part of the curriculums that I was presented, not part of job readiness, not part of career foundations, not part of TIP, another one called TIP out of Loyola University in the Chicago Poverty Lab. So yeah, but no, now I'm ready, willing, and able. I asked my program manager and he told me that he had done a whole curriculum and that they had he was taught by Chicago Jobs Council. So he gave me a whole big binder. I don't know if that's the curriculum that you are referencing, but now I have, so now I'm getting that ready. And the pandemic right now, we're kind of slow with customers and everything. But as soon as we get rolling, I'm gonna definitely talk about these issues with my clients. And I did speak about, when I spoke about things, it wasn't in a way where it was what do you call it? A systematic way or something that I could present in a, format or a structure or a lesson plan. It was more off the cuff. It was more personal life experience. But I think it's better to do in a more pedagogically efficient and structured way. So yeah, I mean that's what I plan to do when we start rolling with more customers.
Awesome. And for like the folks that you guys work with, like what are these issues that we talked about today you think are the ones that they maybe are dealing with?
Yeah, well, I would say sometimes there's I want to advise my clients to go in there. It's part of really soft skills, I mean, creating worker unity with your fellow workers would really help your soft skills, because you don't go in there saying, oh, look at all these people, whatever you go saying regularly when you meet a lot of people. It depends on what kind of person you are, what kind of skills you have, and what your outlook on your fellow employees are. But if you go in there with the mindset of, okay, we have to build unity, we have to build solidarity amongst ourselves, we have to defend one another. I mean, that's a whole different way of going into any job. So I think my clients would benefit greatly, going into any of the employments that I send them to and that our business rep gets them hired to. Thinking this way, thinking about that, as opposed to everybody else is a rival, everybody else is incompetent and lazy. I'm the only, I'm the only good one. So yeah, I think these skills will definitely benefit and help my customers thrive. I mean, the backside is, I mean, the what do you call it? The other side to it is that employers don't like people that build, unity to demand people's rights or the workers' rights, because they're going to demand it from them. They're going to demand, more money, more wages, better accommodations, that their rights be respected, all the things you're talking about. So, so that's another thing that I think would be useful for them. I mean, to learn is that, there's a way to do it where you have to protect yourself and who to trust and who not to trust. And, you know, I think people that, when I go to a job site, I always try to identify people that help other people, assist people in more than that go beyond the job. For example, in my job, the nonprofit, the friends that I've made on the job site at the nonprofit, I identified people that are helpful. You can tell. You can, I don't know. You guys can tell, but you can tell who helps, who doesn't, who's got a good attitude, who, if you ask a dumb question, will not look at you with a crazy face, but will, you know, will say, "Oh, you can get that over there," or, you know, "Oh, you know, this or that." So, so yeah, I mean, those are also skills that people should have and would help them, you know, identify people, you know, especially if you identify somebody who helps others. I mean, that's the kind of people you want to build unity with, because they're going to help you, they're going to help themselves. They're not in it for just themselves. You know, and you know what? Throughout my years, I've also found that the social committee is a lot of good people. You know, people that organize the birthday parties and the baby showers, because that's volunteer and it takes time from your job, takes time from your work, and you have to do it because you like people. So I usually hang around. I immediately try to join the social committee for the first thing that I join. But those are usually very good people. So yeah, I mean,
Moises, I'm just going to stop you real quick. I'm sorry for interrupting, because we just have a few more minutes in the breakout room. I wanted to see if anybody else had just kind of ideas of how they could connect this to their work, or which of these issues resonated with you, or concerns, reservations, anything. Anybody else who's in the small group? Apologies for interrupting you.
sorry for talking so much.
No. I'm sorry for interrupting you. I think that your point about like finding the people that are the ones who are the joiners is a good place to start for sure.
Are there areas in your day-to-day programming where you think you can include worker rights information? I say definitely many areas. I think in all the previous curriculums that I mentioned, on the career exploration, in the building soft skills and building worker resiliency, of course, I think these areas of worker rights and are definitely could be put in there. These worker rights information could be put in all those curriculums and would help my clients. And the last question, do you have any concerns or reservations about talking about these issues in the context of the workforce development work? I would say no. No. I don't know. I'm a very confident person that I know my rights, and I know this would help my clients. And yeah, I don't, any kind of backlash, which I don't expect, but if it comes, I would be able to deal with it.
That's great. I appreciate that so much. I think it helps. I would imagine too, though, like you said you're at Central State Staff, right?
Yes.
So you work with Hugo?
You know what? Yes, he's in Riverside. I'm in Little Village.
Okay.
But I do work with him.
Having leadership, established folks who've been there a long time and who have also agreed that this is very important. I mean, I know that your organization years ago, they were like, Hugo was in one of the very first classes, train the trainer classes I taught like 8 or 9 years ago.
Do you know Abram? Do you know Abram Garcia?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Abram also.
he's like, I got the binder from him. So you train them. That's the
Mhm.
binder, that's the curriculum you're talking about.
Yep.
I got
Exactly.
it. I got it.
It helps that, like, you know, like you guys have already you're on the program. I think I've noticed it being, you know, more challenging in places where you know, frontline staff want to do this stuff, but the leadership is not quite sure that this is the best use of time, and they're more than anything very concerned about offending partners. Okay,
How
so
how can I get that the trainer class or training?
We didn't offer it this year because of the pandemic. It will be probably offered in the fall. I don't know. I'll talk to Ashley. Ashley works for Chicago Jobs Council. We haven't figured out when the next one will be, but pre-pandemic, we did at least one, if not two, like intensive 2-day long train the trainer classes at Chicago Jobs Council. But then I also did ones in other parts of the state for folks who are interested. Let's come back as a big group, Molly, please.
Yep.
Yes,
So
so breakout rooms have been closed, so they'll be returning in about 20 seconds.
And then Moises, just to answer your question, yeah, I think probably the best way to find out when the next workers' rights training would be to get on our mailing list. I'm happy to, I think you probably are on our mailing list, but I can definitely keep you posted next time we run one. And I think a good interim piece would just be to check out the curriculum that's on the website. The link was provided earlier today, and it's also in all the follow-up materials. And I recommend that you check out the curriculum there.
I will. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, so I think we're all back now. Just for our last bit time that we have together, I was hoping we could talk about some of these issues in more concrete terms. And, you know, I'd love to hear what you all were talking about in your small groups. So Ashley's gonna be our scribe and write some of this stuff down. So between the issues we talked about today and then, you know, other issues that perhaps you've been thinking about in the world of worker rights, what are the, oh, there was a poll, right? That's what I'm missing, Ashley.
That's okay, no worries.
there was a poll. Let's do that first. It was the first question on your discussion questions. What worker rights issues that we discussed do you think most affect your clients and job seekers? And you can pick as many as you want. This is just kind of a good way to see how this all fits in, or what are the areas that we need to focus on. And it looks like we need to focus on everything. Shocking.
So we're going to go ahead and keep this poll open for about another 10 seconds. All right, so thank you so much, everyone, for putting in your votes. Here are the results.
Interesting. Is anybody else surprised or have like any immediate reactions looking at the findings from this poll?
I was looking for all of the above button.
Exactly, right?
I just don't really feel like one outweighs the other.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's also an issue that, like, when you have one, probably a good likelihood that you're going to have the other two, right? A lot of these issues go hand in hand. Okay, so we're going to now just have a big group discussion. So please feel free to unmute yourself and put on your cameras if you want. And Ashley's going to scribe. I would like to, oops. just kind of get hear what you all talked about in your small groups about where you think some of this information could fit into your day-to-day programming. So remembering that in the very beginning of the webinar, I gave you a few examples of how, different ways, different modules that are in the curriculum activities kind of connect with stuff that I know that people in workforce development do, the kind of work you do. Thinking about financial literacy, but using like a paycheck exercise to talk about wage theft, things like that. So just curious if folks could shout out, raise your hand, whatever way you want to participate, answer this question.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I'm currently located in LWIA 7 over in the north and northwest suburbs of Cook County. And we had a train the trainer workers' rights training for one of our staff members actually trained all of our staff members.
Awesome.
On workers' rights, and we've incorporated worker right training, and even to your point about the how to read a paycheck and things like that, how to actually fill out tax paperwork, fill out the I-9, the whole bit. In our youth program, it's a manufacturing careers internship program called MCIP, and we do that in our boot camp. We touch upon a laundry list of activities, soft skill training, job readiness types of training, but workers' rights and all of those intricacies when it comes to the taxes and paychecks and things like that, we incorporated into that. Our focus is out of school youth 18 plus. And then after their boot camp, they participate in an 6 to 8 week boot camp, internship, paid internship at an employer, and we can address any issues there at that time. But we are the employer of record and carry the liability for that. But it's just a great opportunity for our young people to understand really what their rights are and when they are starting a new job and actually starting a career.
That's amazing, Lisa. Where did you say you work again?
My agency is Business and Career Services, and we are doing the WIOA Title 1B out in the north and northwest suburbs of Cook County, but we operate MCIP throughout Cook County and in Kane County.
Awesome. Awesome. And is this something that like agency-wide is discussed, or is it just in your area or what?
Well, we discuss it with certainly all of our career advisors. They were all trained, and that includes our adult career advisors and our youth career advisors. But we also have those conversations with our business account executives as well. So when they're working with employers, they can have those discussions if they see that there's, something as simple as having asking the question about if they've, have any felony or misdemeanor on their application and things like that. Just simple questions, that way and then we provide them the resources, when it goes even beyond some of the simple stuff, because we're not the experts, but we do have all of the information located on our American Job Center's virtual resource room. So.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anybody else want to share?
This is Diana. I'm in LWIA 4, which is Sal Bureau, Putnam, Ogle, Whiteside, Carroll, Joe Davies County, the northwest corner. And I just wanted to say thank you for sharing the curriculum for workers' rights, because one of the things that I plan to do at our next management meeting on Monday is to propose that we incorporate that in everything that we do, including our youth or dislocated workers and our adults. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm trying to, sorry guys, I'm just trying to figure out how I can leave the presenter mode so Ashley can actually write this stuff down. And it's amazing how like 13 months in, they're still
No worries, Allison. I've got it on my side, so I'm just going to share my screen since we only have the last 2 slides.
Okay, so stop share.
Yep, I got it. You're perfect.
Go. Okay, that's wonderful. All right, any, who else? Please know too that I recognize how, you know, just like the limitations in, you know, not only this time that, you know, we're doing so much virtually, but, you know, just in pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, that there's so little time already. And so that's why, as I said in the beginning, that the curriculum is set up so that hopefully it's not adding on that much work. But I'd like to let folks know that I'm part of an important effort right now with other people who are involved in this arena and workforce development, and also with funders, to think about how we can really do some like systems change so that providers are incentivized to not only place with, you know, better quality employers, high road employers, but also like have, you know, spend meaningful time having conversations about these things and having their staff trained on worker rights.
I just wanted to say one little thing. There's a portion, I don't know if people teach the TIP curriculum, but we're gonna keep it around because it's such a good curriculum. But there's one part in the TIP curriculum where they ask the customers or the participants about who supports them, like who do they support and then who supports them. And I think in that instance, when we ask that question and whatever they say, but then, you know, we also then add on, you know, what we think, where they can get support. But there's where I could say from other, you know, from other workers could support you, worker rights organizations can support you, unions can support you, you know, Arise, Centro de Trabajadores Unidos, all kind of organizations that can help you. So so yeah, I think in that part of the curriculum, we can tell people to look out for support that exists there to enforce and fight for your rights.
Thank you, that's awesome. And you reminded me that I wanted to point out one of the resources that's in the Google Drive folder that folks are going to get access to. In the enforcement and organizing folder, there's a list of all the worker centers in Chicagoland and their contact info and information about who it is that they serve. Worker centers, we've mentioned them a few times. These are community-based organizations that help workers navigate these issues, help them, you know, connect with the Department of Labor if they need to, or connect with an attorney, or organize with their coworkers. And they typically serve populations that aren't necessarily being organized by unions. So like a lot of the worker centers in Chicago really focus more of their efforts on immigrant labor and people working in the informal economy, kind of working under the table. But at least for folks in the Chicago area, I recommend this as a very good first line of defense to let people know that, you know, when they're having issues or have concerns about their worker rights, that it's it might make a lot of sense for them to go to one of the worker centers first. These are free organizations, they don't charge or anything. At least for Chicago area folks, that I think is a really awesome resource we have as kind of a first place to go to, first line of defense. That being said, we have incredible state agencies that are doing an awesome job to protect worker rights as well right now. And so I didn't put that contact information in the resource folder because I know a lot of you all work for these agencies, but you know, just going to the Illinois Department of Labor's website is a really good starting point, and it's pretty easy to navigate now. So just thank you, that reminded me about the worker center piece. What else? Does anybody else have any ideas, or did things click in your mind about places where this stuff could fit with your existing work?
Yes.
Yeah, this is. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. This is Sheena Parker. I work for the Illinois Department of Employment Security, and the information regarding workers' rights would fit into my day-to-day programming in reference to educating the employers. You know, I do a lot of employer workshops. I don't think it would benefit my job seekers, so to say, but educating the employers on the employer rights is important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And good luck to you. I don't even attempt to take that on, but
I'm gonna take it on. Watch.
do it for the team. Very appreciated. Thank you. Who else?
This is Wolfgang Arterberry with DHS, DRS, Title IV, and workers' rights, the skills trainings, job readiness, and especially self-advocacy is what we do for our clients. We serve everybody in Illinois that has a disability, 16 to 64. All individuals with disabilities that are of work age or close to are eligible for our services. And instruction and self-advocacy is step one, because there are so many barriers most people will face going to work are just exacerbated when you're thrown on when you're somebody with a disability. And making sure they're not going to be trampled on by the world they're trying to enter or have entered or trying to retain a job within is a hurdle enough. And that's why most of what we do with our customers is training them in these things.
That's fantastic. I don't think I realized that DHS was doing that kind of stuff at that level of detail. That's wonderful. Are there
the entirety of Title IV is that WIOA Title IV is vocational rehab, and that's what we do with vocational rehab.
Thank you. Are there any other ideas that people thought of or heard of in their small groups about ways that this could fit into some of your programming?
I heard somebody say that there is a curriculum. Now I'm looking at your Google Drive and your presentation. I don't know if I'm seeing that or not, but we educate high school equivalency and English as a second language at Wright College, and worker issues come up a lot. Students bring us stories, and it would be helpful if we could infuse a lot of this into our curriculum. I'm looking at your docs, they're wonderful. I'm just not ready to figure out how we can infuse them, but is there a curriculum? I thought I heard someone say that you shared a curriculum.
Ashley, can you?
Yeah, so great question, Joe. I've just put a link into the chat box. Perfect. If you go to that link, a little bit further down on the slide, actually, I'm going to share my screen real fast just to show you where it's located. The area right here that says Workers' Rights Resources, you can request the curriculum right here. And so if you click on the link that's inside the chat box, that will take you over to it.
Gotcha. I came in late, so I apologize.
No worries. We totally understand.
Right.
Yeah, no worries at all. And just so that folks know, so this is the third edition of the curriculum. The first one came out in 2015. We have to update it often because things change, right? And so I'm trying to get funding right now to release a fourth edition, maybe early next year. So keep an eye out for that as well. Any final thoughts on this, on just kind of thinking about ways this could fit into your programming? Or alternatively too, like that third question that was that I charged the small groups with having, what are your concerns or reservations about talking about this stuff? or do you have concerns or reservations? Are there any questions that are remaining from anything we talked about today? We went through a lot fairly quickly. I'm very impressed with you all. This is like a extremely long webinar to sit through, so thank you. This is my contact information. Email is a great way to get a hold of me. Theoretically, I will be available to come out and teach again at some point, but what we know after having done this, Ashley and I and Ashley's colleagues for a number of years now, is that there's, even if I go out and visit every single one of you, it's still such a drop in the bucket. And really the best way we can spend any of our time and resources is training all of you to do this on your own. So let's figure out, next step is how to do that. What kind of train the trainers we can do. And I have done train the trainers for, I did one for the wage and hour claims people at Illinois Department of Labor last year. And I've done stuff through DHS and DCEO this year. So I am more than happy to come out and do things like that and really do train the trainer stuff, especially. Anything else? I wanted to thank Donna, who is the ASL interpreter who came in, who I did not recognize earlier. And I really appreciate you, Donna. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Like we mentioned earlier, you will be receiving a copy of all the materials that we've covered today, as well as the link to the Google Drive that Alison has graciously filled with even more information. We encourage you to reach out to us if you have any questions, that kind of percolate after looking through things. So feel free to do that. And with this, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Molly to wrap us out.
Thank you so much, everyone. If you look in the chat, I just put again the link to the resources folder in the chat box. And then I'm also going to post the link to the slide presentation today as well. So thank you so much for joining us and for joining us for this summit overall. We're so grateful and we hope that you have a great day. This concludes our session.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Happy May Day.